Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Live. Hope everyone's okay. Thanks for everyone in the chat so far. Well, we've got an interesting one for us. We've got an interview with Shawn from HINDMAN Auctions. So if anybody's got any questions about watch auctions, not eBay or Chrono24, this is through an auction house, add them to the comments and we'll ask them live. So it should be very interesting. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, should we kick this off with a wristwatch check? Shawn, what watch are you wearing? Do you want to kick us off?
Sure. This is my Rolex GMT 1675 from 1977.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a nice piece. I got it through auction, not this auction, but another auction in Europe. Had it for a couple of years and I really like it. This is kind of my go-to every day. Sometimes when I go to places that I don't want to be too flashy, especially in Europe these days, I've had a few friends get, too much attention with these watches, but this is kind of my everyday, so I really love it.
And how is the dial patina? Is it got any of the crazing on it or anything?
No, not yet. Unfortunately, I'm waiting to wake up one morning and start seeing some action, but not yet. No.
Well, Patrick, do you want to go next? We'll follow on the
Absolutely.
bottom.
Well, sadly, I'm away from home for the week, so I'm wearing the exact same watch I was wearing on Sunday. I'm wearing my my Crador GCLL 999, and it's just one of the special editions by Crador, and I'm happy to have it on the wrist.
Jason, nice. I don't think we need to go full screen for this, but I'll do it anyway. What's your what are you wearing?
I'm wearing my Bell & Ross BR01 TAC 92.
Oh,
stainless steel. Oh, this thing's sweet.
Awesome.
Look at that.
Nice.
On the wrist. Surprisingly comfortable leather strap. So I got this in the trade with Todd. I traded him a Fortis Classic Cosmonaut day date straight up. And he's got the service papers for it and everything for this. And I traded him the box and papers. And for those of you at home that don't know, I have a 7.5-inch wrist. So, I mean, it's big. It's definitely a beefy, but it's real thin. Like, all things considered, and it's very comfortable. And I'll tell you what, man, the winding action on this thing, it is super smooth. There's no giddy up. It's just smooth. And for being so wide, it's surprisingly, like I said, comfortable. Deceptively comfortable.
That's awesome. And I'm wearing my, you probably guessed it now. I've not taken it off. My my mint green dial date just. I nearly fell out with John on Tea and Ticker's podcast, on Tea and Ticker's live stream today, because he messaged me saying, I said, I bought a NATO for it. He said, you can't put a NATO on a dress watch. I'm like, it's not a dress watch. It's a sports watch. So I nearly fell out with him.
How long did you have to wait to get that watch?
I waited the day after Watches and Wonders, which is, I think, about 4 months. April, May, June. Yeah. So I waited about 4, which I think is pretty good going, because this was a brand new color dial in this size for them. The mint green, the green motif and the blue motif. So yeah. And this is exactly the combination that I asked for, Jubilee with the smooth bezel. So big shout out to Junie at the Rolex dealer, Rolex AD in the Mall of Millennia in Orlando, for not only sourcing me this watch, but they treated me like royalty when I came in. It was really cool. I don't drink, so I couldn't have the champagne, but I had a nice refreshing glass of water.
Yeah, Todd didn't give me anything when I traded him for this. So I'm a little bummed out about that.
It didn't send you champagne.
No.
I wanted to keep they had like a Rolex napkin, and I wanted to keep it, but then I thought, is it going to look a bit weird if I kind of keep the Rolex napkin? But they gave me like a bow and stuff, so awesome. Well, Shawn, should we kick this off then? Why don't you start with? Well, you could talk a little bit about your current role, but you've got quite an interesting background in watches, haven't you? And things like that. So how did you get into watches? And then let's talk a little bit about some of the places that you've worked and where you currently are now.
Yeah, well, I was actually born at the epicenter of horology in Geneva, Switzerland. But it wasn't until I moved to the US over a decade ago that I really got into watches. I started as a gemologist, so I studied precious stones and started buying and selling diamonds for different companies. And that kind of got me into the auction world, where I first started at Sotheby's in New York at the watch e-commerce department. And then I moved on to the Real out in San Francisco. That's a e-commerce luxury company. And now here I am at HINDMAN Auctions. I started my own company over the past 3 years that was based in Asia and helping luxury startups. And I had the opportunity to join HINDMAN. We're headquartered out of Chicago, and we have 13 offices throughout the country. And so I am heading the watch department here, and it's been a fantastic journey so far. And I wanted to kind of tell the world who we are and what we do, and what we can offer. And so very excited to be here.
And HINDMAN do multiple. They sell all sorts of things, don't they? I noticed on the site you've got some jewelry and artwork and things like that. But your particular focus is the watch side.
Yeah, exactly. So we have about 50 plus collecting categories. Obviously, the big ones are contemporary art, modern art, etc. And watches, jewelry and watches is we're one of the fastest growing category in the auction house.
Nice.
Yeah, this is the website if anybody wants to check it out. It's been a very interesting couple of years for watches, hasn't it? And watch prices. What's your take on it? I guess the last couple of years, in particular, the kind of bit of a roller coaster we've had in 2022.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of hype around watches, of course, as we all know. Highly driven by COVID, by crypto, by the stock market, by people's disposable income and how much time they spent online. And I think that it benefited the pre-owned watch market. And if you look at all of the predictions from McKinsey's and Deloitte, all the prediction says we're growing at 8 to 10% year over year, and it's grown faster than the primary watch market. So I find that fascinating. Obviously, right now there's perhaps a little dip, but I think long term the pre-owned watch market is set to have a very optimistic future. So I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned before that your watch auctions aren't consistently going. You do a couple a year. Is it? How many?
Yeah, right now we're scheduled to do 2 a year, but it will depend next year, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll have 3.
So how do you go about then creating a collection to be sold? Are you going out and researching, investigating and sourcing these watches yourself, or do you have like a group of people that send you watches, or how does it work? How do you create a collection, and how do you make those decisions of what will make it and what won't?
Yeah, so to start, we have a very strong network of watch collectors throughout the country and around the world, buyers and sellers. And so they reach out to us whenever they're looking to consign one of their watches. Also, most of the time we have a lot of our business comes from estates. So they would reach out to us, and I travel a lot for work, and so I would go visit the watch collection. I'll take a look, I'll inspect to make sure everything is authentic, everything is up to par, no Franken watches, no inauthentic watches. So there's a lot of work on that end. And then of course, determining the price is key in this market, as we all know. What is finding that optimum? We want to please the seller and we want to please the buyer. So that's also part of my work. And I find that really, a very fascinating part as well to how do you price a watch? Even if I don't dictate the price, the market will say what the actual price of the watch is. I'm still there to kind of guide buyers on what we think the price will, what the hammer price will be.
Sean, I heard in a video about some cars. I know it's not really watch related, but they kind of are. That people, especially in the auction websites for cars online, a lot of these people are going off.
Oh, Jason froze there a little bit. Well, sure, is a very good question there. We've actually, Patrick, you spotted one in the comments section.
Yeah, so a question that was listed in the comments, which is kind of one you hear often, is just how often is it for some of these high-end watches where, let's say, the company itself comes in and tries to, build hype by either bidding up and or bidding and winning their own watch. And obviously, you may or may not know this, just because I don't know whether your bidders are all private or whether you sort of have more information on them before they bid, but what's your take on any of that?
I can't really comment on that just because I don't have I know it happens. I know that Patek Philippe, they do buy watches to buy back and showcase in their museum in Geneva. I do know that other manufacturers do that as well, but I don't have that's not something that they don't do it to elevate the price or to create hype around it, but they do it to preserve the heritage, or if it's a special watch, they want it back to be able to expose it so that other people can enjoy it. What do you think? I mean, that's kind of what I've been hearing, but I cannot prove it. It's just kind of what I've been hearing.
Absolutely. And I kind of agree with you. I don't think too many companies are doing that. I mean, I think the other, the last auction that I saw that really just rung a bell was, someone bought a Rolex Hulk and they paid like $90,000 for it. And you just want to be like, why are you paying $90,000 when, the market's at a high asking 30? But I think the idea is a lot of people can maybe use charitable and or, tax break benefits for buying some of these auctions. And, to them, it's a tax write-off. So the price isn't necessarily so important. Right. And, and I think that's where I think a lot of those sort of prices that no one understands where that price come from, not necessarily just the companies buying their own watches back. But as you said, I'm sure it happens every once in a while, but I don't think that's the majority.
Yeah, and also you've got to imagine that some of the stories you hear where it's the brands buying the watches themselves, I'm sure it does happen, but I bet you it's not for nefarious purposes all the time, because I bet you they don't have these in the archive. I know Patek, I think, does an excellent job of keeping the watches, but I don't think Omega has its own. I know Omega's at auctions bought their own watches back, or that was the rumor, and it's probably because they're like rare, like things like that.
I was thinking of because I have I have a number of Breitlings coming up for sale, including one that I think is pretty special, but it was a Breitling that very hard to find information online, but it's stamped not for sale in the back and with a reference number XXX. And that Breitling was designed for the American market for authorized dealers, but it was never meant to be sold. So I think I'll reach out to Breitling and say, hey, by the way, I have this watch. It's in impeccable condition, and I think it's pretty special. So if they want it in their museum, they're more than welcome to bid on it. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity there for them to buy it back.
I would say the one time that this probably does happen is probably in more of the independent market, and because this is Sam's channel, and I'll be more politically correct than I usually am. I won't drop any names, but there's a certain company out there who, probably is inflating the market for a brand that only makes 1,000 to 1,500 watches a year, and because of that, if a watch did come to market, it benefits them directly and indirectly to buy it at a high premium because it boosts up the entire brand. So when we're talking about these rarer Rolexes and Pateks, I don't think it happens as much, but definitely I think it might become a problem for some of these independents where there's large stakeholder companies who, have a monetary interest in the benefit of the company.
Sure. I'm curious to know which who you're talking about now.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Oh, I won't. I know. As I said, I've got my knife hat on today.
This is for entertainment purposes only. Well, let's talk about one of the things that I'm interested. I noticed this in the last Philips auction where it seemed like there was one particular military issued Rolex, and it seemed like all of the watches, there were some heavy hitters before it came to that. It was sort of mid towards the end of the auction, and it felt like the watches that you thought were going to go high didn't get a lot of bids in the room, and I always wondered whether it was because people were waiting, and it got a premium, this military issued Rolex. So how do you make it? Is that something that you're aware of as an auctioneer, like where to place watches, or is it randomized or are you trying to like tell a story as you're selling them, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. The flow of watches plays an important role, and the energy in the room and online as the hammer goes down. And so I do think that having a strong a curation of watches with an order that makes sense will definitely help elevate the price. And so different auction houses have different strategies on how they want to position the watches, but typically, you would group, vintage Rolexes with each other and more modern with each other, pocket watches, etc. So there has to be a logical flow throughout the auction.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed from my personal experience that watches not near the very beginning do a little worse, and watches near the very tail end do a little worse. Kind of in that 3/4 hump is kind of like the sweet spot.
Exactly.
At that point, I guess people have either decided they aren't going to buy this and aren't waiting to the end. But the first one, no one wants to, blow their load early. And at the end, everyone's already spent their money. So they're getting a little bit more frugal.
Yeah. When I buy personally watches for myself at auction, I always try to look for the middle to see and hope that people are they logged out, or they went to grab a coffee, and then it's my turn, and hopefully I'll get a good deal. So, but yeah, but now it's such a globalized world where you have bidders from Asia and the Middle East and Europe and all around the US, that you're really competing against the whole world, right? And so online auctions has really flattened our industry, and I find that fascinating too, to see who's going to end up paying the premium price for that particular model. Is it going to be a collector in China or in the US or in Europe, and how bad do they want that watch? So
yeah, that's what I thought was really interesting about the latest Philips, was because they do a lot of preaching of where the bid came from, and I kind of thought that was neat, because most of the time you'll just see a paddle, you'll see a number, but they'll be like Ron from Dubai, Peter from China, and as you said, you're kind of like, they're almost pinning the countries against each other. And I did think that was kind of neat, just to see how, international this watch world is.
Yes. A few auction houses do that. Antiquarium in Geneva as well, where you would see, New York versus Dubai versus Hong Kong. And so you're right, that does create some sort of competition.
And how do you execute your auctions? Is there, so we saw in the last Philips one that there was an actual auctioneer there live with the gavel, and there was people in the room, but also people on the phone. So is that how your auctions go, or are they online and then there's like several days to bid them up?
Yeah, no. So all of our auctions are live online, and so Jeff. And so you can follow the auction online the day of the auction, and people can bid, or they can participate, or they can just watch as the watches go on sale. But everything is live. We don't have that. I think the other one that you're referring to is kind of the like over a 2 weeks period where no, we don't have that. I don't find that to be an optimum way to buy or sell, to be honest, and I'm glad that we're not doing that type of auction, but I know others do.
I've bought, I think Sotheby's does some versions of that, and it's not as fun. I mean, as I said, I guess in a way you don't want your auction to be fun, because that probably, well, at least I don't, because that means I'm probably going to pay more. But when you're just putting in a bid and just hoping that someone isn't going to capitalize on top of your bid in the next 3 days, it's not as fun as you said, having a real live experience where you get to put in your bid and sit there for 15 seconds and hope that you get to hear the words going.
Yeah. It was quite exciting watching. I think I keep saying Phillips, we're talking about but I remember it's the same on the car one, isn't it? The car one that they show on TV. I forget the name of it, but where they bring the classic cars in and stuff. It's always much more exciting when they show it live. Somebody in the chat, I can't remember the name of that. Somebody in the chat will remember. So when you're creating these watches, it's also very important to make sure they're authentic. So do you go and look at the provenance of the watch itself, or do you do anything? Do you have a team of people that authenticate them, or is it that because you're buying them from trusted sources, that's the key?
No, I can never trust the source, even because maybe they inherited that watch and maybe it was a present. So I'm always on guard. Recently, I got as an example, I was down in Naples, Florida, and I met with this gentleman, and he had this Patek Philippe reference 96, one of the first references ever made by Patek Philippe. And the watch was, I wish I had it here so I could show you guys, but this watch was in mint condition. Like, I've never seen a dial like that. And it was so crisp that it caught, I was like, this can't be a 1945 watch. And so at that point, I didn't open the movement. I just said, look, we need the certificate from archives in order to make sure that we can, sell this watch. And so I had a few conversations with him. He eventually found receipts from the Stern agency in New York, as well as the certificate of archives. And I was able to connect the dots and realize that actually he had owned that watch since 1977, and it's been kind of sitting there. And that's why there was no scratches, and that's why it's such a crisp watch. And so, sometimes, and that doesn't happen very often, where I'm like, wait, why is this so off? Like, you don't see, a 50-plus-year-old watch that it's so crisp. Like, that's, is very rare. But so those are the situations where I'm very careful. And then, of course, you have to inspect the movement, inspect the hands, the dial, et cetera, as we all know. So, and of course, the paperwork's help, receipts. Everything adds to make sure that what my job is. I'm kind of an inspector, and I like to prove myself that this is an authentic watch. So that's kind of my thought process. Yeah.
Is there any brands that? Obviously not. On luxury brands, is there any brands that you don't specifically look for, either because the price fluctuates too much, or it's a particular brand that you yourself don't like? Do you make any judgments about the brands that you want to create yourself, or?
Well, if I can sell it, I'll sell it. It's at the end of the day, the market will speak for itself. So, I'm always looking for what's the next hot brand out there, because we have collectors from all generations, Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, and baby boomers, and older. So I try to cater to the whole spectrum of our target demographic. And so, there's a lot of new brands out there that are emerging that I think are pretty cool. Do they have a pre-owned market following yet? Maybe not, but in a few years they might. So perhaps, I'm going to take a chance on on a specific brand because I think it has a strong following. But maybe it's not the right time, and I'll wait a few years before representing that brand. So, but no, at the end of the day, it's all about, you know, the big guys, you know, the Rolex, the APs, the Lang & Zones, the Audemars Piguet, the Richard Mille, etc. You know, those are kind of the blue chip brands that, you know, everybody's trying to collect.
Mm-hmm. To step off on that question a little bit, I guess I have a question about the inside workings. I have a very bad habit. I buy from auctions, but I've yet to ever sell, because when I buy something, I usually keep it. And, you know, the idea is, I know you take in consignments. When you take in a consignment to sell in your auction, you know, you get a percentage, you know, gavel price at the end. But do you also get a consignment fee for bringing in, or is your only fee the gavel price?
No, so the seller's commission will vary anywhere between 35 to 10%, depending on the value of the watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. And then on the sell side, it's a flat 25% commission.
Okay.
Because
that was kind of my question leading into what Sam said about like what you may choose to bring in, because I do find it kind of interesting. You'll, as you said, see a whole auction full of APs and Royal Oaks, and then all of a sudden you'll see a Bremont, and you're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And you know, I said it is just kind of an interesting choice, but as you said, you don't really have an exclusion as long as you think it's something that will sell and sell easily.
Exactly, and also, you know, if a watch collector has, you know, a number of incredible watches, and he also has that Bremont watch, you know, I'm not going to
you'll take the whole.
You know, yeah, of course, and you know, I'll probably be pretty conservative on the estimate and on the reserve. But that's, you know, it's part of our business. We do want to build long-term relationship with our clients, and that's kind of a service that we would do.
When you do have your semi-annual, how many watch listings do you have in your full auction usually?
How many watches do we have? And I would say between 60 and 150. Depends. On the last auction, we were a little below 100. So yeah, it really varies.
And when's your next one coming up? Because I downloaded the app and I don't see a watch auction.
Yeah, and that's because we're still I'm still in the midst of curating and sourcing these watches.
Sam read my mind, so it looks like it's going to be October 12th.
October 12th, yeah. And I have I have a Richard Mille Felipe Massa. There's an incredible Audemars Piguet tourbillon. And you know, some Patek Philippe roll timer. So I have some really special pieces that are coming up. So I'm very excited.
I'll definitely check it out.
But I also have some more affordable, like, you know, watches that are really cool. I have, you know, some Seikos, some what do I have? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I have a lot of, you know, $1,000 to $2,000 range too, which I think could be a really good deal for an entry-level watch collector.
Well, jumping on that, do you know anything about, or are you allowed to tell us about, let's say, what that Seiko is? Like what, as I said, what made that Seiko, let's say, be able to come into the fold?
I thought it was a cool watch.
Nice. Okay.
I'll send it to you. I'll send you a picture separately, and you know, maybe you'll like it. But no, yeah, I have a lot of watches, like I said, you know, $1,000 to $2,000 range, or sometimes even lower. But most of the watches are probably you know, north of $5,000.
What's your view on the Patek Nautilus, the Tiffany dial one? The what? Not necessarily your view on the watch, but your view on the fact that watch was made to auction off, basically, wasn't it? They purposely made or it seemed they purposely made a model just to auction it off. Do you think, what's your view on that? And do you think more brands will start doing that type of thing?
I think it was brilliant. I think for as much as you know, they got a lot of criticism for that, but at the end of the day, that's kind of marketing 2.0. And you know, I admire the how bold, that bold move, and how, Oral back just worked his magic, because you can't replicate an Oral back. And so for me, combining Patek Philippe with Phillips auction, I think that was an incredible move. Whether that's going to happen again, we'll see. I don't know if most Swiss, manufacturers, they're very, very conservative in how they approach marketing, right? Rolex didn't have an Instagram before 2016 or something. Like, they're very old school, and I can say that because I'm Swiss and I know their mentality and how long it takes for them to move forward with kind of a bold move. And so we'll see what happens. I think some brands are better predisposed to surprise us. Hublot is always kind of Breitling, Hublot, and I'm always waiting to see what's the next move. So we'll see, and maybe it's going to be a move through an auction house.
Yeah, because you think at least the actual in this crazy kind of fluctuation that's gone. I mean, I don't feel bad for the manufacturers, but you do think that somebody there's like, oh, we made this watch at retail for 30,000 and it sold for 140. So somebody, we had a question from the audience here that said 35% commission. What is the price threshold to hit that higher commission? Is it like a sliding scale? The more affordable the watch, the higher the commission is, or is it?
So no, 35% commission is only on watches that we consign that are below $2,500.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So those are the instances where obviously it's a lot of work for us to market the watch, to do the photography, cataloging. I mean, there's a lot involved. It's a very high touch process. And so obviously we have to make money somehow, and those lower value watches, 35% is the standard commission fee.
Out of all the watches that you've, I mean, I kind of asked a similar question on the last live stream that we did, but wondering what interests you about watches. Is it a rare model watch, or a watch that has some kind of provenance to it, like it was owned by a famous person, or it did a certain task? Which you kind of go towards yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I like the story behind the provenance. It doesn't necessarily need to be somebody special, but I like to learn. I meet these incredible collectors throughout the country, and there's a story behind every watch, and creating that connection through a watch and those conversations that are generated from that object between us. I for me, there's nothing more special than that. So yeah, I would say provenance more than the type of watch. I can fall in love with somebody else's watch just by the story behind it, and perhaps even the engraving or some scratches or dents that tells a story. For me, that's the story that it tells me, and that's kind of what got me into watches.
I've got a question jumping back on Sam's previous question, which was about the Tiffany dialed Nautilus. How often, when a really high auction item like that gets sold, how often does the bidder renege on that bid? Because that's what happened with that one. Was it went for that high price, and then they actually then sold it off to a very very young kid, and
he was Hong Kongese, I believe, no? Or
But Zach Attack is his name on Instagram.
That's right. Yeah.
And he bought it, and so there's this young kid running around New York, and he's wearing this multiple $1 million Nautilus. But the original bidder backed out, and after that, I think a lot of auction houses don't really publish that information, but because this one was so famous, that they sort of talked about that the previous bidder didn't. And I'm just kind of wondering how often that happens. Yeah, because it's not like eBay. They're not contractually liable by making that bid. Yeah. Or are they? I mean, can you go after them and say, hey, you owe me? Or are they just, is it a gentleman's wager, not enforceable?
Yeah, no, it happens more often than we want it to happen. When it does, they're immediately blacklisted, so they're not able to bid on any of our auctions. But I don't really have a solution for that. I don't really know what can be done to prevent those from happening. I don't have an exact percentage or number to share with you, but it happens more often than it should.
Yeah, well, as you said, completely frustrating because you do all this work, you do
Yeah.
all this prep, all these photos, and then poof.
Yeah. But when it happens, you know, we would relist the watch in the next auction, or we can sell the watch privately. So you know, there are different alternatives if the buyer defaults on the payment.
Oh, this is a good question. Are you allowed to? I guess you're not, but are you allowed to bid on watches? And if you're not allowed, which I'm guessing you're probably not allowed, is there any that the one that got away, the one that you fell in love with, that you sold?
So no, I am not allowed to bid on my own auctions or in any auctions at HINDMAN, but I am allowed to leave absentee bids. So meaning, you know, if I'm looking to buy a watch, I can, before the auction, I'll just leave what my maximum price is, and if it goes higher, then I won't get it. If it doesn't reach that price, then it's for me. Most of the time, I never get anything, which is great. That means that we're doing good. But you know, hopefully, I'll be able to get a watch one day from HINDMAN.
Is there one you fell in love with that it was hard to sell, that was hard to part with, or
no?
Transactional?
Yeah, no. I try not to be sentimentally attached to anything because I've learned the hard way, and seeing a watch go was very painful. Same with and I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, but selling a watch that you then regret selling is one of my biggest pains, actually. Like I really, seller's regret is a real thing. And that has happened to me more often. I feel the pain more when I sell a watch that I shouldn't have, as opposed to missing the opportunity to buy a watch. So that's my experience. How about, have you gone through that, Sam? Or
do you know what? We've talked about this on the podcast a bunch of times.
Okay.
I haven't ever regret. There's one watch that I regretted selling because I sold it not knowing what it was, and I think I could have got more money if I knew what it was. But I've never regretted actually selling a watch, and I don't know whether it's because I sold I had a Speedmaster for like 12 years, and I got married in it, but I sold it. I don't know. I think when I get a new watch, I'm like all about that. I'm all about that watch. I'm very fickle, I guess, with it. So I don't. I haven't ever sold a watch yet that I've regretted selling.
Lucky you.
But Patrick, I know you haven't really sold anything, but is there anything, or maybe one you missed on auction, one that got away?
Oh, I've got tons of those, but I'm showing one that I used to own. You know, this is my first luxury watch, and it's just a very weird. I mean, this is 20 years ago, but I
still have it.
Oh no, and I regret it. It's the only watch that I probably only sold because I was so naive into the hobby. But that was my first, you know, luxury watch. It cost about $2,600, and which is a lot for a Seiko, particularly 20 years ago. But it had a movement that was made in the micro artist studio. Even though it's a Seiko, it has Grand Seiko stuff in it. But it has a capacitor in it, like an Eco Drive, and after 10 years, it stopped holding a charge. And when I was sent it off to Seiko service, they told me it was going to be like $1,000 to service. And once again, as I said, being as naive as I am, I was like, that's a lot of money. I'm just going to sell it. And I said, I wish I didn't. Now Jay Leno owns one, and everyone calls it the Jay Leno watch. And I said, it's just a really cool watch. I really enjoyed it. It was my daily wear for like 10 years. And then I started getting multiples, and well, now I'm in trouble. But I do regret selling
it. So Pete, big friend to the show, Pete from Not So Obvious Watches. How are estimates set? Take that Tiffany Patek. Its estimate of list was total fantasy. Are there any rules requiring these estimates to be realistic?
I can't speak for the Tiffany 5711 that was sold at Philips, but we use comparables. We look at auction results. We look at what's currently available in the market. We look at the condition of the watch to see if we can go up or down. So yeah, we use comparables and some of our historical hammer prices as well from our own auction house to make sure that that the estimate is correct. But for that particular for the Nautilus at Philips, I really don't know how. I think that all of those prices are a little bit inflated at Philips. I cannot explain why or how, but it's not usually a good reference point for me, just because I find that those prices are higher than what the market should be.
Yeah. I had another question from a couple of questions ago. I just remembered it now. When we were talking about watches with provenance, have you ever come across like a famous watch or like a historically significant watch, or one that was perhaps owned by a celebrity or somebody famous? Have you ever auctioned one of something like that off?
I have. I wouldn't be able. Those are usually very private clients. They are famous. You would know who they are, but they don't want their names to be displayed. They just want to be anonymous and sell the watch. And so I think, for the buyer of that watch, he'll never know that, that it was worn by somebody, a very successful businessman or a very famous, VIP or whatever. So, but that's a choice that they make, and they want to, stay anonymous and discreet. So we respect their privacy, and I'm not allowed to share or comment on that.
I suppose that must be quite I guess that's quite frustrating, especially if it's a celebrity, because if they want to stay anonymous, but that, wow, if this was, Michael Jordan's watch or something, that it would really kick it into another echelon of, for fans of that, sports star or celebrity or something.
Yeah, I think provenance is one of those weird phenomenons. It could really elevate the value of the watch just because it was, a president's watch or a famous athlete, and so I do agree with you. I think if they want to disclose who they are, I will definitely encourage them to, but that's always up to them, and most of the time they prefer to stay anonymous.
Yeah, so Pete's echoing that. He's saying it's kind of sad to see the watch history kind of culled like that, where it's obviously got a provenance, but then the seller's decided to be anonymous, so it doesn't have that association with it, which and
especially when I sell a watch and then the seller finds the box and papers months later, all of those documents are so important for the integrity of the watch, but at that point the buyer is far, and just we cannot connect the dots anymore. So that's another element that gets lost, and I find that also very very sad for the history of that watch.
Yeah. Well, I guess we've come to the time now to ask you about which watch would you say is the best is not the same. Which one surprised you the most, that in terms of its sale price, or in terms of, or perhaps the other way, maybe you were expecting it to achieve a higher price and it didn't? Was there?
Oh, you got me there, Sam. I was not ready for that question. No, I think I need time to think about it, because there's so many watches that I've been keeping track on, like prices these past 2-3 years and beyond. But I can't think of a particular watch that. I can't think of a particular watch. But I'll keep that question in my head while we continue to talk, and hopefully I'll get back to you on that.
Well, Patrick, I suppose we could ask the same question about any pocket watches as well, couldn't we? Like, is there any?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, because I'm a equal opportunity watch collector. As you can tell by my handle, I actually really enjoy collecting antique pocket watches, but I also like collecting weird wristwatches. So I'm not really your Rolex guy, even though I have a Rolex, and I'm not your AP guy, because to me they're just kind of too normal.
Sure.
And like the last auction I bought from an auction house was from Sotheby's, and it was the Panerai PAM 172, because it's the only tantalum one they ever made. And so to me that was like, I love it. It's tantalum. And the reason I wanted to buy it from an auction house is what you talked about previous, was that way, as easily as PAMs get faked these days, I know that it's legit, because, Sotheby's, HINDMAN, any of these real auction houses, you're going to, stand by your product. And, I said, and that's kind of what I liked about it. In terms of Sam's question about pocket watches, they're not that popular on the auction sites. I mean, I look, and there are more focused, auction sites that actually do pocket watches, and I definitely favor those often. But generally speaking, the big boys, they may have a pocket watch on there, but I think like on the last big auction I saw, the only pocket watch they had was some $75,000 weird skeletonized, super machine, and I'm like, that's not really what I go for. So, as I said, I wish that happened more, but I understand it. It just doesn't have the popularity. I'm a weirdo. People want the wristwatches.
Yeah, well, we sell pocket watches on a regular basis. So I'll connect with you, and maybe there's some treasures in there that I'm not even aware of, but you know better than me on those. So yeah, no, definitely. A lot of pocket watches come through my hand, but most of them, they're too low value for us to work with, so I let them go.
Yeah. Oh, it's completely true. I mean, that's what I actually love about the pocket watch hobby so much, is that, you can dabble in it for a couple $100s. They range all the way up to tens of thousands, but there's plenty that, I think people think are worth a lot more than they really are, but they really aren't, they aren't worth it for an auction house to do all the work for. Yeah. So I definitely understand.
Yeah, changing tax here a little bit. I know, obviously, with the eBay over the last sort of 15, 20 years, it's seen more watch sales, and there's a clear delineation there, wasn't there? Patrick, you alluded to it, where you can buy stuff on eBay, but you're never really sure of. At one time, you were never really sure of the authenticity. There was always that question on high value watches, but now they've started to do the eBay authenticates thing. Same with, I think Real does something similar as well. Do you think that eBay's going to start encroaching on the auction houses like yourselves in terms of sourcing like rare watches and watches with provenance, or do you think I guess what's your view on the sites doing the authentication services now?
I mean, I think it was a very smart move from eBay to do that. They didn't have a choice, because, eBay, at the end of the day, they sell a watch every second. It's the biggest platform for buying and selling watches. The problem with eBay is that it's flooded with counterfeit watches and Franken watches, and it's just, you cannot trust, unless you know what you're doing. But even if you think you know what you're doing, you might buy something that you're not trying to buy. So I think that it was a very smart move for them to focus on that sector of authenticating watches. Now, is it scalable at the level that they're looking to reach? I'm not sure. I think they still a work in progress. But to your point, the real, they're doing the same thing. And at the end of the day, I think people who are loyal to the real will buy watches there and not eBay. And I think everybody is kind of in their own echo chamber of who they prefer to do business with. And so yeah. No, I think it's a smart move. I think companies will continue to go in that direction, and I think it's great for the industry.
Yeah. Let me put my just not so nice hat on for a quick second, because it's so convenient that I'm wearing the watch that I'm wearing today. So I actually bought this watch on eBay, and I made a video completely about the authentication service, because it's amazing how thorough they were in documenting the authentication, even though I don't really buy any of their authentication, because obviously this is a really weird Japanese domestic product only. There's about 200 of them on the entire planet. It got sent off to Ohio. It was in their hands for 3 hours. 3 hours. It told me when it was delivered, and it told me when it had been packaged and placed back on a truck. So I made a video that pretty much said in 3 hours they were able to, look at this, take it apart, do whatever they were going to do to authenticate. And at the end of the day, it still doesn't have the factory. It's a Crador bracelet, but this is a titanium bracelet. This is not the standard bracelet. I have one on order from Japan. And so, the only thing that they're doing is pretty much saying, does the watch look like the pictures in the article? They actually do not in any shape or form authenticate real versus fake versus Frankenwatch. And I don't think they really explain that very well in their, description. They make it sound like if you buy a Rolex, that's going to be a factory Rolex. They're not claiming that. They're claiming that, if they took a picture and it's got a red bezel, it will have a red bezel. And, they're not claiming that bezel is, not a counterfeit. And so I'll just say from my own personal experience, I don't think the eBay authentication system is as good as, let's say, a real auction house authentication system.
No, I'm sure you're right there. I mean, you often see the videos of them authenticating this, like sneakers, don't you? They have like sneaker specialists, don't they? But so I wonder. Yeah, I've often wondered that. Maybe we'll have to do a separate thing on it, like especially around the Frankenwatch, because you can a watch can be authentic components, but are the components, especially with some of the vintage stuff. But
yeah, well, I said like with this watch, it's so rare, no one even knows of it. I mean, Joma Shop did a Blog to Watch did an article called like a rare bird, because nobody even knows this watch exists. So how does some guy in Ohio who, no offense, probably doesn't know much about, Japanese domestic product only watches, able to authenticate it in 3 hours? I mean, at least phone a friend and be like, hey, can you tell me something about this watch? And, I know they didn't. So as I said, I was very hopeful of the service, but after having my personal experience, I think it's just a pile of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've sold and had them authenticate, so I obviously had a good experience because they confirmed to the buyer that it was. But anyway, well, let's go for some questions from the audience then. Oh, this is a good one. Is there a watch you'd like to auction off? Something that might be really fun but doesn't come up often?
Ooh.
Or maybe there's a brand. Is there like a brand that you've always wanted to auction off, but it doesn't come up often, or do you tend to get like a good mix?
Yeah, we've had a good mix, but there's definitely some brands that are underrepresented in our sales, and some that I personally like more. There's a lot of there's a big trend right now coming out of Switzerland is those micro brands that some of them are doing a great job. The problem is that they do great in the primary market, but they don't really have that community in the secondary market. So they don't generate a lot of hype in the secondary market, and so for us it's a little bit of a risk to auction off those watches. But yeah, I don't want to single out a micro brand, but that's kind of the direction that I think I want to. If I can find some collectors that are interested in consigning those, I'd be happy to take a look at those watches, because there's so much hype around those blue chip brands and blue chip models that I think it's doing a disservice to all the other incredible watches that are being manufactured, and so I want collectors to appreciate also kind of those watches that don't have the same marketing capabilities as those big brands.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, recently did a podcast with Scottish Watches, and they're a big. They have a lot of independent Swiss brands that they love to champion on there. I guess sort of nearing the end here now. I think a consistent topic, we've talked about it on the show quite a bit, is this idea of watches for investment. Do you find, I mean, do you have a view on watches for investment to start with? And I guess also, do you find, do you see like a clientele shifting? Do you find people more looking for advice on investing in watches, or do you still see majority collectors at these auctions? I suppose it's difficult for anonymous bidders, but
yeah, no, I think so. I always advise collectors to buy what they love, wear what they love, and then when they don't enjoy it anymore, to sell it and buy something else that they will enjoy wearing. You know, watches has emerged, you know, this past decade as an alternative asset class. You know, when people, you know, they diversify their portfolio, they have their homes, their art, their cars, etc. But then they're looking into this alternative asset class, and that's where you know, watches can turn into an investment. But I think, you know, the majority of people don't really know what they're doing, and sometimes, you know, I meet some of those collectors and they think that their watches is worth this, but I'm saying, hey, no, like this is where we are, and break the news to them. But and so I think you have to be really smart, because you know, it's only the top 10% of the watches, you know, top 10% of watches that have the potential of increasing in value over time. And so, you know, with that, I think that it requires a lot of attention to following the market, following the trends, and also a lot of speculation, because you don't know if it will go up or down. So at the end of the day, I would say, you know, buy what you love and enjoy it, but don't buy it for the money.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's been fantastic. I don't know, Patrick, did you have any last questions? Or
no, I mean, I just harp exactly on what Sean said there. I mean, I don't think of them as investments, but definitely I think, you know, there is a subset of the world that does. You know, some of them, of course, probably are going to get a rude awakening, because just like real estate, you know, there's fees to selling and fees to buying. And, you know, if you don't take into account those fees, you know, as you said, you might have a watch you think is worth 25 grand, but you're like, well, you're really only going to net about 20. And all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I didn't make money on this watch. And, you know, and that's too bad. But, you know, I completely agree. I think watches are wonderful treasures. They should be enjoyed. And, you know, and I love auctions for the sake that, you know, you get to open my door to items that I don't have access to by myself. And as I said, that's why I'm an auction addict.
Love it.
Cool. Well, just last little plug then. So if anybody wants to find out more, it's HINDMANauctions.com. Next one is on October the 12th. Sean, do you ever share any of the images on like Instagram beforehand, or is it the big reveal is at the auction?
Yeah, so I'll reveal what we have for sale probably 3 to 4 weeks prior to the auction. And yes, we are gonna, you know, have everything on social, on Instagram, and yeah, this whole page is gonna be full of watches, very nice watches. So look forward to sharing all of this with you.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Sunday Social. Appreciate everyone watching, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Sam.